The Paperclip Strategy, how Trent took a really simple idea at the age of 23 and built it into a multi-million dollar career. And this is a fantastic conversation with a serial entrepreneur that I found through the book Atomic Habits. And so in the book, there's this chapter that he talks about this stockbroker who, very young, built a fantastic business. And so I tracked him down. I'm like, what is he doing now? And my goodness, Trent did not disappoint. He's got a lot of different things he's been doing. So this episode is a little bit different in that I asked him about his entrepreneurial journey, and he tells a story of kind of what happened at each stage. Think of it like, and then at each stage, I'd stop and I say, what did you learn here? What would you do different? What was the mistake? And it is full of gold. Like, for instance, when he started out, it was all about volume, making calls. And I said, what was the mistake? And the mistake was that he would not chase clients. He would use content and draw clients in. It's a big distinction, a big difference. And so this is just one of the many things you're going to get when you listen to this episode. I think you're going to love it. Before I start into this, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Omwell. Omwell is an amazing tool for Canadian brokers to engage with their database. It creates amazing reports that show home equity, buying power, refinance opportunities. But even more recently, they got this ability to see opportunities. So when clients, if they're engaging with your reports, you can see that. Or if there's opportunities for them to save money because of the rate that they're in and what the current rate cycle's at, it'll actually notify you with a big, hey, there could be $30,000 savings on this client. Check them out at omwell.ca/Scott and check out this conversation with Trent. Hey, Trent, welcome to the show.
Scott, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you have one of the most interesting stories in terms of an entrepreneurial journey that I've heard in a long time. And I'm very excited to get into this. I got it initially. I got connected with you through the book Atomic Habits, and your story's in that book. So before we tell that story, maybe just tell me a little bit about yourself and like who you are, and I know it's like that's evolved. Maybe who you are today, and then we'll go back and tell the story of because I think there's a lot of cool insights that you've got from your broad entrepreneurial past that you've had.
Sure. So the very, very short answer is I am a real estate investor. I'm an airline pilot, and I, by accident, became a pretty popular YouTube guy in the aviation space.
Right. And that was not, okay, so that is today. Now, back when was it that you were doing, originally you're from Canada, you're in Abbotsford working at a credit union or something. And so in the book, to maybe tell the story about how you got picked up. And then how did the writer, James Clear, find your story? I guess that's the other thing I'm interested in, is that you have this story, and I started kind of researching. I was like, man, this guy is interesting. So that's why I wanted to have you on.
Well, thank you for saying. So my first career, so I grew up in a quick backstory. I grew up in a very poor family. We were on welfare a couple of times, homeless. Dad went bankrupt a couple of times. So nobody was teaching me good financial lessons. And I had seen some situations in the family household due to financial scarcity that I didn't like. And so it was really important to me to not be poor. And so my very first job was actually, I went into the Air Force because I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I got accepted. But then military budget cutbacks in Canada that didn't pan out because it just wasn't available to me. So I wasn't going to go to college because I'd already got this job. When I was applying to the Air Force, I was selling photocopiers in a territory in Abbotsford. And I did really well at it. This is like 19.
Apparently they had a good training program for sales. I've heard other people that went through that program years ago.
Yeah. And so I was making like $5,000 or $6,000 a month back then. So this is 30 years ago. So for a kid, I think I was 21 at the time, that was huge money. So then got into the Air Force, budget cutbacks, got out of the Air Force. And I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? And so a whole long story that I won't bore you with, but I met a guy and he talked me into getting into financial services because he said I'd do incredibly well at it if I knew how to sell. And I did. I knew how to sell. So I thought, okay, I'll do this. And so I got hired by a Canadian company called Scotia McLeod. It's in Canada, we have these 5 big banks, or we did at the time. I don't even know how many there are now because I haven't lived there in a long time. I know it's still in business, but so I got hired. I was probably the youngest broker they'd ever hired. And for people who aren't familiar with being a financial advisor, you're basically in sales. Your job is to go get the clients. You could be a stock picker if you want to, but a guy really early on, one of the most successful brokers at that company, he said, Trent, don't spend all your time trying to study stocks and figure out if they're going to go up and down. Spend all your time in sales trying to get more clients, get more assets under management, and make fee income. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So I just started cold calling because that's all I knew how to do. And I didn't have any money to do anything else. And of course, this is all pre-internet, no digital, nothing, no social media, yada. Like there was hardly voicemail back then. And so it took discipline. And I created my very first system where I had 2 baby food jars on my desk. And my goal was to dial the phone 120 times every day because I knew if I dialed the phone 120 times, I'd get through to approximately 30 to 33 people out of those 30 to 33 people. And I was calling business owners, small business owners, trying to get them to invest their retirement savings with me. So 32 people, 10 of them would agree to receive this packet, this little booklet that the company had. It was called 10 Ways to Save Tax Through Your Investments. And folks who are successful in business were sensitive to paying tax. So that was a thing they were interested in.
And we love taxes in Canada. Side note.
Yeah, and they love taxes in Canada. And so out of those 10 people, 3 of them would meet with me and 1 of them would become a client. So I was picking up a client almost every single day. But what I would do to make sure that I was really, really disciplined was when I came in the morning, I didn't check the stock tickers. I didn't read the newspaper, like nothing. I was a sales guy. So every time I dialed the phone, I just would move one paperclip from one jar to the next. And I wouldn't stop dialing the phone until all the paperclips were moved. That usually took me till around lunchtime. Then I'd have lunch. Then I'd leave the office and I'd go on my 3 appointments and I'd close my 1 client. And by doing that, I was the top. So they bring you in what they call these rookie classes. They train 30 or 40 of us at a go, and then we're in the class together. And so I was the top guy. I brought in, I think, 5 million under management in my first year just from cold calls, which was a pretty astounding sum. I made, so back then that was $1993. I made $75,000. Again, I was 23 years old, and I made 75 grand. Like it was nuts. All my friends thought I was a freaking millionaire. And so that's kind of how it got started.
Or a drug dealer.
Yeah, or a drug dealer, but definitely not that. And so that's how it got started.
Wow. Okay. So then you, in the book, he talks about the paperclip. I don't recall it, but
Paperclip Strategy.
I love that strategy. Yes. And so how did he find out about that to put it in his book?
I don't remember exactly, but my best guess is, so I have been a podcast host for like over 10 years. I had a show called Bright Ideas for 10 years. I did 600 and some episodes. I don't even remember how many. So I was known on the internet, and my guess is, and so I knew a lot of people because it was a talk show like yours. So 650 shows is 650 new internet friends. So I knew a lot of people, and a lot of people knew about me. And I guess this was, James wasn't nearly as famous as he is now because he hadn't written the book yet. But somebody introduced us. And so we did, I think, an interview on his podcast, if memory serves me correctly, or maybe he had him on my podcast. It was a long time ago. I don't remember. But when he found out about it, he's like, wow, that was really cool. He says, I want to write a little article about you, or maybe include you in my book. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. Sure. Having no idea that his book would become like this insanely killer bestseller of all time.
25 million copies sold.
Yeah.
It's like up there with the Bible kind of thing.
I've been recognized as the paperclip guy a couple of times now.
The paperclip guy. Okay. So then when did you leave the financial services industry? And then what was we're going to do, as you go through your journey, here's what I would love. What was your biggest lesson that you learned in that career? So like, what was your biggest takeaway from, and I'll ask each time you change careers, I want to know like, what was your big lesson or that you got, or a failure you had that you learned from? And then we'll move through the path, which would be, for me, this would be an interesting conversation because you get to tell the story, but then I get to pull out the nuggets. So what was that? 2 questions I'm going to ask. Biggest thing you learned and biggest mistake you made in that stage of your life?
So from the first job as a financial advisor, biggest thing that I learned was that if you're willing to hustle and put in the work and pick up the phone and talk to a lot of people, you can be really successful really fast. And biggest mistake that I made was not taking the time to understand marketing, because I wasn't doing marketing. Cold calling is not marketing. That's
sales. That is all a heavy lifting. Yeah.
Sales. Correct. And so eventually I burned out. I just didn't want to pick that sucker up anymore. But I had the money to market, but I didn't know anything about marketing. So of course, what was I doing? I was spending all that money on like motorcycles and boats and cars and a house and all the toys that some stupid young kid who was making that much money would do, as opposed to figuring out, okay, how do I actually grow business out of this thing using marketing so that I'm not chasing people, so that they're coming to me, which is what my life these days is all about. I don't chase anybody for anything. But I didn't learn that that was the.
What would you? Okay, what third question? What would you do different? So let's say we plunked you back down, or you could go back and no, let's do it today because there's different technologies. If today, knowing what you know, how would you approach if you got you went back to Scotia McLeod and you had to grow a book of business? What how's the marketing thing you'd implement? What would you do to try to get to attract as opposed to just grinding calls?
Yeah. So ironically enough, I am kind of sort of doing the same thing. I'm not going back to work for a firm. I've got a new channel called Invest with Trent. I'm going to be what's called a capital aggregator, in that I raise funds from individual investors to be invested in various types of real estate backed assets. And so if you think I'm going to cold call my way to success on that, you're crazy. I always now, and for years, have started with a content first strategy. Everything I've done for the last 10 years starts with, I create content, be it YouTube videos or podcast or blog articles or whatever. I mean, for over 10 years. And as a result of that, I never have to spend any money on advertising. And people come to me instead of me chasing them. It's a huge difference.
So that would be the shift, is a content first strategy, which you probably couldn't do in 1993. It'd be very difficult to do.
No.
Like you had to do but it's a great place to cut your teeth in sales and learn. And then one last question on this: how did you handle rejection? What story did you tell yourself? Because I find sometimes what's going on between their ears matters more than what's actually happening in the real world. What's going on between your ears to make all those calls and not get discouraged or frustrated?
It never really bothered me. I never took it personally. They were just another number in my stack of 120 paperclips. I was one no closer to my next yes.
Right. You didn't think about it. You just was like, who cares? And all right.
You don't know me.
Okay, so where did you go from there? When did you leave that and where did you go next?
So after I got burned out, I got an offer from a mutual. So I'd been selling a lot of mutual funds as this financial advisor. And so I knew people in the industry, and I got an offer to go work for this mutual fund company as what's called a wholesaler. So a wholesaler's job is to go and visit the stockbrokers, which I used to be, and say, hey, you should recommend our funds to your clients. And so it's really a schmoozy, take people out for dinner, golfy job. And so they were going to pay me $200,000 a year. And again, so at that time I was 25 to go play golf and take people out for dinner. And I was like, well, okay.
With an expense card. She's like, sign me up.
Yeah. I mean, basically my process was the same so I lived in British Columbia at the time, and my territory was, Abbotsford, I think southeastern British Columbia, and the Okanagan. So every week I'd get on an airplane, little commuter plane, and I'd fly into my territory, and I'd spend 3 or 4 days in the territory. I was single, so there was no reason for me to be home. I wasn't missing anything. And so I would just basically line up a bunch of meetings with people who were financial advisors, mostly who were already selling our products. So I was going to try and get them to sell more of our products. And I would go and meet with them in their offices, or we'd go play golf, or we'd go out for dinner, or we'd do whatever to try. So my job was to try and educate and encourage them to recommend our products more often than our competitors' products to their clients. And I did that for a couple of years, but ultimately got pretty bored because it was not a very intellectually challenging job.
Right. Okay. What was your big lesson from that career and your mistaken lesson? Yeah,
don't do something just for the money. There's got to be more to it than just the paycheck, because the paycheck gets, and I know it sounds stupid, or it might even sound trite to people who have never made $200,000 in a year, but the paycheck, you'd be surprised how quickly you get used to it and take it for granted. And then it's really not that big of a deal anymore. Now, again, if I was with hindsight now, what the move would have been, honestly, is keep doing that boring job and then just start living on the minimum expenses possible and invest every dime extra in real estate. And I would have been very able to retire, probably by 40 if I had been smart.
Right.
But I didn't do that.
Yeah, but at 25, I didn't have any sense either. So I'm glad to hear you didn't. I think it's a common
cars,
affliction.
Motorcycles, girls, boats, all the things.
Right. Okay. So then you did that for a couple of years. So what was the next kind of stop along the way? This is kind of fun, actually. I've never done an interview like this where we do like your journey and then lessons and stuff along the way.
Yeah.
Because I feel like your lesson there was also your mistake, is that you realized that you were like, hey, my lesson is that stay at the boring job and just pump all extra money into an asset. But where was the next stop for you on your path?
First stop as an entrepreneur. I decided that it was time. I needed intellectual stimulation. And so I never went to college, I never went to business school. I just assumed that if you had a small business, you'd be rich. So I thought, well, I want to be rich. richer than I already was because I was doing pretty well at that point. So I decided, well, I'm going to gamble every dime of my life savings and I'm going to start this company and it's going to be this big, amazing company and I'm going to get super duper rich. So I quit the job cold. I sold my house. I cashed everything in. And then I went and so I started an IT services business. I didn't know jack diddly squat about IT services.
What made you pick that particular industry?
What made me pick that? I don't know. Random. Trust me, it wasn't research. I was just
right. And this was probably in the 90s, or when was this?
No, I remember now. When I worked at the mutual fund company, we had this guy named Ed, and he would come in and fix the computers at our office. And Ed was a cool dude. Part of my job also was we would have booths or boxes at hockey games and basketball games. And so I would take clients. And so if I ever had an extra seat, I would say, Ed, hey man, you want to come? Like, I got an extra seat. If you want to come and watch the game, that'd be cool. So I ended up talking to Ed more at these games than all the clients, which was not what I was supposed to be doing. And one day I said to Ed, we should maybe partner up and start something. And I said, I'll create the funding and I'll do the sales and you just bring the technical brains and I'll give you a quarter of the company. And he's like, yeah, I'll do that. And I said, how long do you think it'd take us to break even? He goes, oh, probably not more than 90 days. It took us 5 years to break even.
Wow.
We can go as far down that rabbit hole as you want. I ran the business for 8 years, ultimately did get a 7-figure exit out of it. But man, you want to talk about the school of hard knocks. Whoosh, that was a rough go at times.
So why do you think it took so long to get it to profitable? What was the mistake you made, or what would be the advice you'd give yourself at that? If you could go back in the time machine and say, do this, what would it be?
Yeah. So I didn't understand some really basic things that I now understand about business. Things like, what is the lifetime? First of all, what is your business model? What is your economic model? How does the company make money? How scalable is it? What is the lifetime value of a customer and what does it cost you to acquire a customer? I didn't know any of that stuff. I just thought, well, I'll just go around and sell people, and the more customers that we get, the more money we'll make. Like, I was a simpleton, man. I had no idea. So initially the business was a time and materials business. We were basically just a labor shop. And I very quickly realized that wasn't such a good plan. And so we were competing for this one deal against a much larger competitor. And through my just absolute sheer tenacity and unwillingness to take a no from the customer, we ended up beating this other business. And in doing so, unlocking an entirely new business model, which is now what's called a managed service provider, where we would deliver our services over the internet instead of showing up in person. And we would charge them a flat monthly fee instead of hourly charges so that I could build a recurring revenue model, which in theory is great, but you still have to factor in what is the cost of customer acquisition? What's the lifetime value of customer? Because if your lifetime value of customer isn't 3x your cost of customer acquisition, you're going to have especially if you're bootstrapped like I was, you're going to have a hell of a time making money. Cash flow is always going to be a huge issue, and growth is going to be constrained as a result of the lack of cash flow. And that was exactly the world I was living in. And I proceeded to bury myself $400,000 in debt before I started raising money from angel investors.
Right. And so you basically created a subscription model out of something that you just sold one-off service for, which managed services. And so your big lesson in that is that you said like the lifetime value of a customer, cost of acquisition are two lessons you picked up. And what was I guess that was your mistake as well. So where did you end up next? You sell this business. Where's the next spot on the journey of Trent?
Yeah. So when I sold the business for the first time in my entire life, I had some money, like decent amount of money that I didn't need to go to work for a while. Like, I probably could have taken quite a few years off and done nothing and eventually run out of money. But instead I took a couple of years off. I moved to Southern California and my life was surfing and riding dirt bikes for a couple of years. And that's when I first started to get interested in real estate. I tried to be successful. This was right around the GFC now, the Great Financial Crisis. And so I was trying to buy I was sending out a whole bunch of postcards, like $2,000 worth of postcards every month for people who I thought might be worn out landlords. I was trying to buy houses and get them to carry the paper and turn them into rentals and build a rental portfolio. That wasn't working. At the same time, as I mentioned to you, I'd met somebody surfing. And this girl, she was making like $200,000 a year with a bunch of little websites, making affiliate commissions, doing this thing called internet marketing that I knew nothing about. But once I met her, and I think I'd already blown through like a year, $24,000 worth of direct mail costs and not done a single deal. I was like, okay, that's not working. And the reason was the housing prices had fallen so much, people just weren't willing to sell for, half of what it was worth a year and a half earlier.
Right.
So I started diving into this whole internet marketing thing, and she gave me some coaching and so forth, just informally. And I started to become a pretty successful Amazon affiliate by building all these little websites that would rank number one on Google for a single key term. Like, for example, Canon T300 Ti review. Like if you would punch that into Google, my website would come up first, and then I'd have affiliate links to Amazon. And if people clicked my links and went and bought the camera on Amazon or bought whatever in the next 24 hours, I'd get a commission. And so I spooled that up to, I don't know, it was about $4,000 or $5,000 a month in income. And at the same time, I'd started this blog where I was blogging like crazy. This is my first foray into content creation. And I was just sharing the whole story of everything that I was learning, everything that I was doing. And my blog got crazy popular. That's when I decided I would come up with a training course to teach other people how to do this. And suddenly now I was making like 30 grand a month again, working out of my living room, which was amazing. But like all good things on the internet, technology changes, and a couple of serious algorithm changes. Panda and Penguin came out. This is in about 2010. So my SEO world just got wrecked. All of my sites became useless. And then I had to reinvent myself yet again because the thing I was doing no longer worked. And so I immediately stopped selling my course because I wasn't going to sell a course on something that didn't work anymore. And so then I became a marketing automation consultant because for the last couple of years, that's what I'd learned how to do in my own business, was how to use this particular piece of software called Infusionsoft, how to create all these marketing funnels so that when people go to your website, they download what was called a lead magnet. Now they're on your email list, they see messages, they buy stuff, blah, 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 blah. And so over the next couple of years, my wife, she became my wife during this period of time. We both became Infusionsoft consultants, and we were helping small businesses to do all of this kind of digital / guerrilla marketing for their businesses. That evolved into us having a digital agency where we worked with these clients, and we did that for a couple of years until the next phase, which I can talk about after.
Right. Well, so what did you learn in that phase? What was the lesson, and what was the mistake in the affiliate phase that you're in, the SEO affiliate phase?
Oh, building a business on a house of cards was the lesson for sure. What I didn't understand was how often Google changed their algorithm. And so when you build any type of business that is reliant on an ecosystem that you don't own or control, you have a house of cards. One day it will fall apart. The same goes for, building your business on Facebook or building your business on Instagram or even building your business on YouTube, because you can get banned. There's all sorts of things that can happen that can instantaneously put you out of business. So you really need to avoid what I now call the single point of failure.
So what would you do different if you could go back again and talk to the younger Trent who started this affiliate business? Is there anything that you would do different to either, maybe it's still going to go away, but to either increase the revenue that you made from it or extend the life of it or make the next pivot easier? What would you have done? What would be your advice to yourself then?
Oh man, don't do that business. To be honest with you,
that's a legit. Like I remember Jason Planadin. I can't remember his last name properly, but he used to do it. He was big into affiliate. Yeah, what is it? How do you say his last name?
Fladley, and I had him on my podcast actually. I knew
Fladley, yeah, he's a smart dude, man. That guy can, and he did it. He crushed at Amazon affiliate stuff for quite a while. But again, of course, the market changes, and then it no longer becomes a viable. So you wouldn't do that business at all. You just say do something different.
Do something different. And so in my case, the next thing was, so I'd had this podcast. So now I'm in my content creator sort of early years.
This feels like a Taylor Swift album. So it's like the Eras tour of Trent.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a Swiftie, so I don't know how relevant that is, but I was in my training wheels phase of creating content. I'd been doing this podcast called Bright Ideas. I had the who's who on my show, lots of people that the internet marketers would have heard of. And then, so the one big lesson that I want to impart on people about being a content creator, in particular, a podcast host, it is the single greatest networking tool on planet Earth. Because what other way can you go to somebody who has knowledge that you want and get them to give you that knowledge for free? You can't.
Yeah.
if I cold emailed you, Scott, and said, hey, can I have an hour of free advice on how to be successful in the mortgage business? You tell me to go pound sand. But if I say, hey, do you want to come on my show and let's talk about how to be successful in the mortgage business? You'd be like, yeah, okay. So the podcast turned into an opportunity creator for me. And so one day, I am at this point in time, I'm now trying to create my own products to sell on Amazon. I'm sort of returning to the original ecosystem. And that they call this private labeling, where basically you're finding factories in China that make products, put your own brand on them, blah, blah, blah. And some people were very successful at that. I put about 4 months into it and had no success at all. And in and around that time, I interviewed a guy on my show who was an Amazon reseller. So he wasn't making his own products. He wasn't starting at zero. He was contacting brands that had some sales on Amazon, but they weren't doing a good job with Amazon. So if someone who really knew what they were doing would come along and handle the Amazon sales channel, revenue could go up substantially. And as soon as I understood what that business model was, instantly I was like, oh, I could do that because that's just B2B sales. And so I immediately, like literally that day, hung up from the podcast, said to my wife, I go, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. You keep running the digital agency, let it, because we had one big client at that point in time that was doing really well for us. And I put all of my energy into this and the business took off like gangbusters. We ended up ranking twice on the Inc. 5000 and I became famous on the YouTubes or on the internet for my second time as this Amazon reseller guy. And ultimately, that evolved to one day where I was talking to this dude who I'd had on my show. His name was Dan. And I was telling him how well we were doing. And he's like, holy crap, man. He says, I sell a training course on people how to do this. And he says, you're kicking all their asses. How are you doing this? And I said, well, I built all these systems and I hired this little army of people in the Philippines and they're doing all the work. So like we're sending hundreds of emails a week. He's like, hundreds? He goes, wow, that's incredible. He says, do you want to come and speak at my conference? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I go there and so I was really well known and it was really kind of weird. I remember walking into the bar that night and suddenly everyone was like, oh, it's Trent here. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever happened because I'd never really been like famous like that in such a condensed industry. So anyway, the next day I'm on stage. I said, hey, everybody, thanks for having me here. I'm going to explain to you everything that I did to have all this success, but I don't have anything for sale. So like take notes because I'm going to fire hose you with information. And I proceeded to do exactly that over the next 90 minutes. Like I literally broke it down step by step. I peeled back the curtain on everything that I'd built. And I'm a systems guy. Like I'm really good at building processes that can be used by other people. And much to my surprise, when I got off stage, I literally got mobbed by people. They're like, hey man, like that was amazing. I need what you've got. And I'd been talking about how I built all these SOPs, standard operating procedures, basically fancy checklists. And they all wanted a copy. And so I said to Dan, I said, look, people seem to want to buy this. Why don't I just make a copy of my SOPs and we'll put them up for sale and we'll do a product launch and we'll see if it sells. And he's like, yeah, okay. Said, and we'll split the money. So we did $412,000 in the first 5 days of making this. I had not a single customer testimonial, but I'd been on stage for 90 minutes. So that was the social.
But you actually done it though. So you don't need a testimonial.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had
your own testimonial is you. Yeah.
Totally. Like, everybody, I was for months, I had been sharing screenshots of my revenue and people knew like I was legit. And so that embarked on the what I call the WEBS phase of my life. WEBS stood for Wholesale E-commerce Business System. It was just the name that I came up with for the collection of these SOPs. And over the next couple of years, I sold millions of dollars of these things and started a software company because they lived in some other company's software. But I thought, well, no, I want to own the software layer too. That was another dumb decision. We can talk about that. But built this software company that I still own to this day. And that was, those were my peak earning years, man. I was making bank for a couple of years. And that's how I got started investing in real estate and commercial real estate and some of this other stuff that we talked about.
Right. Okay. So what was the lesson that what was the lesson you got from that stage of your business?
When you create something of significant value and can offer it to a large number of people in a relatively short period of time, you can make astounding amounts of money. So put simply, when you're selling stuff, whatever the stuff is, if the stuff helps your customer to make money, it's way easier to sell than if it doesn't make them money. So I was selling a collection of business systems that I was using myself. And so I was the proof, I was the testimonial that people could instantly implement in their own business and go out and hire a couple of VAs in the Philippines like I did. And they could, it was like a McDonald's franchise. They could literally just turn it on. And as long as they followed the system and didn't try and recreate the wheel, because if you're a McDonald's franchisee, you don't try and recreate the wheel. You just
you don't make different burgers. You don't sell hot dogs.
You just like page 1, step 1, page 1, step 2, page 1, step 3. You just follow the system. And so I did. I had a profound impact on a lot of people's businesses, especially those who were willing to do the work and do the things that I was doing. They achieved amazing results. And so that became an extremely popular product, and I became very well known for it. But unfortunately, Amazon, they're a very predatory organization. And so anytime there was two things that happened kind of simultaneously. One of them, over a period of a few years, brands started to realize, well, why don't we just hire someone internally to do this thing that Trent's company is doing for us? We could keep more of the margin for ourselves. So that was one headwind. And then the other thing, Amazon is a very predatory platform. So most of the products that are sold on Amazon are sold by third-party sellers, 3P. And Amazon gets all the data on everybody's sales because it's their platform. So if you make widgets and your widgets start selling like crazy on Amazon, Amazon is going to copy your widgets and they're going to displace you out of the search results, and they're going to destroy your company because they're going to do it for themselves. That's just the way Amazon works. And so those two headwinds caused that business to no longer be a viable business. And so then I was just focused on, so at that point in time, for the first couple of years, my software company where this playbook lived, it was very much a blue ocean strategy. We had the only product in the marketplace. There was a substantial niche. I was very well known in that niche. I was the proof. So made money like gangbusters. Once that opportunity went away, we shifted into a red ocean where we were now just a workflow and process management software company with no venture backing, because I didn't need it in the beginning, but suddenly I did. And everyone else had raised money. And so then it became a battle of who could spend the most money to acquire customers. And it sure as hell wasn't me, because I didn't raise millions or tens of millions of dollars for venture capitalists. I should have, but I didn't understand, like, software is the most competitive thing you're ever going to do as an entrepreneur. Like, it doesn't get any harder than that. And I had no idea how hard it was going to be, because for me, it started off so easy by accident, by luck.
Right.
But then
you had a built-in ecosystem to sell to. And, right. Like, sort of cut you off. You had this built-in ecosystem of people, customers that were buying. So it was like, okay, easy. It was a way for you to deliver the other thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, then the car crashed into the wall at 200 miles an hour. And then I was like every other software founder, I realized how hard it was. And no matter what I tried, because I didn't have the money for ads, because the money that we'd made in those 2 years, I bought like this big commercial real estate building with, I bought a motorhome and some dirt bikes and a new house. And, I spent a lot of the money on stuff. So I didn't have the money to run the ads. And so my software company didn't grow. And it's just been kind of like slowly declining ever since. I haven't worked there in 3 years. It just there's nobody that works there, but it's still in business because it's all automated. But it's
it has no customer support or anything?
There's customer support, but just we have hundreds of customers, not thousands of customers. So it's not a huge lift for the customer support. The co-founder actually handles it.
Right. Okay. And so what would you do different? Go back to the beginning of that business. What would you, Trent, say to yourself? What would you say to yourself?
Oh, don't start a software company. Don't. Unless, if you're going to start a software company, you expect to raise substantial amounts of money, and there's a whole, like, what you got to do to be able to do that, because very few people ever get venture capital. Like, just literally don't start a software company. Now these days with AI and how you can have AI write code for you, like, the whole landscape has changed. And so, maybe take my advice with a grain of salt, but even if AI magically writes all of your code for you, you still have this massive challenge of, how do I get customers? And so if you don't have an audience baked in already, then acquiring customers is going to be a very expensive proposition. So build the audience first, which is always what I've done now. I always build my audience first and then figure out what products that they're eager to buy and then simply simplify.
That's the content first strategy you learned back in Abbotsford instead of just calling.
Yeah. I mean, I really didn't learn it until the whole flying. I mean, I learned it before in the Bright Ideas phase, but it went crazy in the flying niche. But that's a whole.
Okay, so this business winds down, and now, so where are we going next? Where's on the journey?
So the business didn't wind down; it's still running. But after a while, I was just burned out of it. I was like, I'm trying all of my best marketing tricks that I've spent 10 years learning, content creation, SEO, the whole thing, and like it's too competitive because, like for example, what's it called? ClickUp. I think they raised like $500 million. How do you compete with that? Like you don't. You're just not going to. So we got to a point where I took one last kick at the entrepreneurial can. I went the opposite extreme. I thought, you know what? I'm going to just start a local services business. And we started this thing called Dumpster Crush, where we bought this $250,000 truck and it would drive around and squish all the garbage in those big open bins that you would see on construction sites.
Yeah.
And that way I wouldn't have to worry about all this internet marketing stuff. Like I could just go around, be my sales guy, get all the biggest construction companies as customers, and then we just repeatedly crush their garbage because it would save them money. That was the value prop for the construction companies. And it took off like gangbusters. Within 2 months, we had all the biggest construction companies in town as customers with some of the biggest projects, and we were dumpster crushing. But there was a competitor in town called Smash My Trash, a franchise, and they were very unhappy about us arriving on the scene. And so as soon as we started stealing accounts from them, because we had a bigger, more powerful truck, and we could squish the garbage more, they chopped their prices in half. And I was like, okay, I'm done. Serious, you can have it. I'm not going into a price war because I've been in price wars on Amazon and nobody ever wins in a price war. And so we literally, as soon as I got the call from my employee, he said, yeah, you know those accounts we got last week? Well, we just lost them all. I said, okay, you can stop driving the truck around. I said, we're going to sell it and I'm done. And so that was spring break of 2023. We were in San Diego when I got that phone call, literally on the beach with my kid. Hung up and I looked at my wife and I'm like, what the hell? And she goes, what are you going to do? And I says, I haven't the foggiest idea. I didn't really want to go start another company because I was a little bit burned out at that point in time. And I wanted to invest more in real estate, but I still needed a paycheck of some kind. And so I'm super condensing the conversation, but basically she or me realized, well, I should probably just go be an airline pilot because that'll be easy. And then I'll buy more real estate with all that fabulous airline pilot money I'm making. And because airline pilots make a lot of money. And then I'll get rich that way and it'll be less stressful and easy and so forth. And that's kind of what put me on my current track. And that was a couple of years ago.
So, okay, now fast forward to today, you go down this airline pilot, but walk me through, because you told me this story before we turned the recorder, but walk us through like from the first post to saying, okay, I want to get my license and I want to be an airline pilot, which typically takes quite a while, but you condensed that significantly. And then that's turned into sort of this whole other side thing that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah. So it all started with, I had this friend named David who'd been a really successful entrepreneur business owner like me. I'd known him for 10 years. And I saw this post on Facebook shortly after I'd decided I was going to become a pilot. And I hadn't talked to David in a couple of years. We'd lost contact. And it had this post of him flying this airplane, teaching somebody something. And I was like, what? So I messaged him. I'm like, hey, are you a flight instructor? And he says, yeah. He says, I'm on my way to becoming an airline pilot. I said, what? I said, no kidding. That's what I've decided to do. And so I said, how do I do it? How do I do it fast? And he's like, do this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and talk to this guy and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So for fun on my personal YouTube channel. So for context, I'd been putting videos on YouTube. They were basically my podcast videos. So they were not well optimized for like maximizing clicks and all
there was
that
not
stuff.
Like
they
the thumbnail and all this stuff.
Yeah. No, it was like you putting this video on YouTube and just hoping it would magically get views. And so I had a channel with 36,000 subscribers. That's what it grew to after 10 years. And it would get, each individual video might get a couple of hundred views, or maybe if I really did well, I would get like 1,000 views on a video. So I'd been on YouTube for a while, but not very successful because I never really had a strategy. I really put a lot of thought into it. And for fun, I put up this video, said, is 53 too old to become an airline pilot? I had no intention of anything. It was merely a curiosity experiment, and it blew up. Apparently, there was a lot of middle-aged guys. So this is after COVID. Pilot wages had gone way up. There was all this talk in the news about an airline shortage. So my timing was not exactly bad, or about a pilot shortage, I should say. And so, the conventional wisdom was 53 was way too old to start because you have to retire at 65. And so all of a sudden, all these people were like, hey, this guy's asking this question and I'm going to watch it to see what his answer is. And so then I put up, so that got viewed, I don't know, I think it was 10,000 times in the first week, which was crazy. More views almost than I'd ever had on any video I'd ever produced. And so I put up another one saying, it was a really long title. It was like my 18-month plan to make six figures as an airline pilot starting at age 53. And it was a claim. It was my plan. I hadn't accomplished anything. I hadn't even enrolled in flight school yet. But right. I had made this claim that I was going to be an airline pilot within a year and a half. And so naturally, well, not naturally, much to my surprise, that video went viral, like 200,000 views in the first 2 weeks. I remember coming home on day 2 and my wife's, I'm like looking at my phone. I'm like, this must be wrong. I said, honey, my video got 14,000 views today. She goes, no way. I'm like, look. And then I was looking at the comments and there was like, at that point in time, I was spending 4 hours a day just sitting on my phone replying to people's comments. And so because I hadn't accomplished anything, there was half of the people that were laughing at me like, you're such an idiot. You don't even understand.
You have no idea what you're doing. Yeah.
You have no idea what you're doing. Like, you're such a jerk. And then there was the other half of the people who were like, all right, cool. I'll watch this. I'll watch and see how this unfolds. So they were my cheerleaders. And so, I just did things that were non-conventional with my flight training. I went through and I was able to achieve 7 FAA pilot ratings in just 91 days, for less than half of what the largest big box flight school in the country charges. So half the time, half the money. Well, no, not half the time, a quarter of the time, half the money. And people were blown away. And so I became like, once I had accomplished that, I wasn't an airline pilot yet, but I'd already accomplished this significant outcome in terms of flight training. I was suddenly like the authority on YouTube for how to basically do 2 things, train faster and save money. And so the channel just grew. And I never, like, I was making the money from the YouTube income, but again, I had no strat. This wasn't a business I was trying to launch. I was going to be an airline pilot and a real estate investor. So I wasn't even putting any thought into this. I was literally just cranking out videos where I'd sit in front of my camera and I didn't even have scripts or nothing. I would just talk. And eventually, how it became a business was that people kept asking me, hey, would you come out with a training course for how to do what you did? And I kept saying, no, just watch my videos. Like, it's literally, I had given away all the information. Everything that would ever be in a training course was easily available for free in my videos, but it's all over the place, right? Like, you got to watch a lot of videos. You're
giving them basically a path is the difference. Is what they pay for is the path. So they don't have to
And people wanted this formula that I discovered because there's a lot of ways to screw up your flight training, picking the wrong flight school, not knowing the questions to ask, not having understanding how the back office worked. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff,
right? Which
all results in slower training, spend more money. And people didn't want that. And my audience was Career 2.0. They were middle-aged people. Everyone was in a hurry like me. They didn't, if you're starting at 48 or 50 and you have to retire by 65, there's no time to waste. Plus, you're not a broke kid, so you have some money. So you can spend it if you have a formula to follow. So anyway, people kept asking me. And so finally, I was like, okay. So I put up this landing page. I said, I'll make this product. And I described it in you didn't even have to scroll on this landing page. It's going to include this. And here's the pre-order button, because I never do surveys when it comes to launching a product. I just you're gonna buy it before it's made, or I'm not gonna make it, kind of thing. And so I had a list, I think of maybe it was 800 or so people on my email list. And so I said, okay, everybody said, you guys want to buy a copy of this thing? Here's the sales page. I'm going to give you 50% off. So I think it was like $40 or something. I forget what it was. It wasn't much money, but this is what I'll make if enough people buy it. And if not enough people buy it, I'll just give everyone their money back. So nothing ventured, nothing gained. And they trusted me enough at this point in time because they had been this super engaged audience. Yeah. Anyway, $3,000 came in that day from one email to 800 people. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I should make this product. So I proceeded to make it, which didn't take me that long because, again, I had so much of this knowledge just in my head. I just turned the video camera on, started talking, and chopped it up into videos and put it behind a paywall. And so that product now has been bought, I think, 700 and some times, and now it's like $167. And then they asked me the next phase of flight. After flight school, most people become a flight instructor to build their time to the 1,500 hours that you have to have in your logbook for an airline to be able to hire you. So how do you do that? Most people work for a flight school. They take two years as a CFI. They make like $25 an hour. So they're kind of starving. Whereas I did it in 1 year. I got all those hours and I made over 150 grand. So again, people were like, how
did you do this?
Yeah. So they said, make another course. So I said, okay, I'll make another course. I called it the 6-figure CFI. CFI stands for Certified Flight Instructor Certified Flight Instructor, I think is what it is. And so a bunch of people bought that thing as well. And then I had flight schools reaching out to me saying, hey, will you refer us students? And then some ground school, hey, will you refer us people? And, the YouTube money. And it all just kind of grew into a healthy 6-figure business by accident, to be honest with you.
That's crazy. Okay. So what was the lesson that you got from this most recent experiment? And I know now it's the investing thing. You're back full circle. Basically, you're back to where you started. But now you're using content instead of calling. You're going to use content to draw people in. And you've also got a much deeper understanding of business and investment and real estate. You'll be in real estate, I think. But what was the lesson in this last chapter?
Niche down. Never in a million years would I have ever guessed that there was an audience of middle-aged dudes who wanted to become airline pilots, that the size of that audience would have been big enough to create a 6-figure business. Because at that point, before I hit YouTube, there was lots of pilots making videos. Some of them were like airline pilots just doing vlog, like this is a day in the life of an airline pilot, but that wasn't really teaching people how to become an airline pilot. And then there was a whole bunch of other pilots who would like fly around with GoPros in their cockpit and say, I went here, I went there, I did this, I did that. But that was more like entertainment content. But nobody had really thought, and I never thought, that there was this market for like, here's how to become an airline pilot really fast without spending 6 figures on flight school. And so that niche apparently existed. And I discovered it entirely by accident. And so now I think about, so to answer your question is, you've got to have a niche audience, and you only need, like, if there's 100,000 people in that niche, you could dominate that niche, and you could probably make a very good, depending on what the niche is. If it's like basket weaving, maybe not. Get it. But if it's something that helps people economically, you could probably make a pretty good living serving just 50 or 100,000 people if that was the total size of the audience.
Right. You heard of the concept? I think I saw this from Tim Ferriss originally, called the 1,000 True Fans.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, like, as a creator, of creative person, artist, if you have 1,000 true fans, you can build a business on that. And so it sounds like, in a way, the fans are the people that pay. You got more people that are interested, but the fans are the customers. And so you've done that in this niche of learning how to fly, in a condensed period of time for less money. Right.
Yeah, absolutely the truth.
Yeah. Okay. This has been so much fun. Where do people find you online now, and and your new thing that's coming, depending on when this episode comes out? How can they find these things to check out? Because I think this has been I love this conversation.
Well, it's been fun. So there's 2 ways they can find me. If you want to learn how to become an airline pilot, just go to flywithtrent.com. If you want to learn about how to navigate what's happening in the world. So I've got a new show. It's called Invest with Trent. And it's at bestwithtrent.com. And the premise of the show is pretty simple. If you are someone who's probably in your 40s or 50s and you had a retirement and financial plan, if I would have asked you 3 years ago, you probably would have felt reasonably confident that everything was going to work out the way you thought it was going to. Now there's Ray Dalio has been writing about this end of the long-term debt cycle and the changing new world order for quite a while in his books. And that's a significant headwind. And then you've got the AI disruption that nobody knows how the hell that's going to turn out. So I'm producing a show to educate myself and those people who would like to also follow along. How the hell do you navigate the next couple of years without losing your ass? And then how I monetize that show is I'm starting a fund that invests in mortgages because I've been investing in alternative assets for about 6 years now, mobile home parks, multifamily, commercial buildings. And I really like the idea of being the bank so that I'm first in line in the capital stack so that my money is ultra safe. But you can still get pretty extraordinary rates of return if you are in the right type of fund. And if people want to learn more about that kind of stuff, just go join the newsletter at Invest with Trent and you will get a free education.
Amazing. Thanks, Trent. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for chatting with me. I have one last question. The girl that you met on the beach surfing, is that your wife or was it somebody else that you talked about that got you into that?
No, I met my wife on the beach in San Diego playing volleyball. The girl surfing, she was not interested in me at all.
Okay. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Scott. Thank you for having me here.
Hey, thanks again for listening. And hopefully you're inspired from this conversation. I know I was. It was actually a format I've never done before, but I love this. And I'm going to do this more frequently with people that have a long history of being in business because it's a great way to kind of capture a bunch of the stories and then the lessons that they got along the way. And for me, I love this kind of stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. Couple of things. If right now we don't use Paperclips, but we use this cool app called the Bricks 10 at 10 app. We created it for our brokerage, but we share it outside of our brokerage. It allows people to gamify doing the calls, doing the DMs. And if you want to check that out, you can click on this episode. There'll be a link, or you can hit me up on social or email me. I'd be happy to send it to you. But I was looking at the stats the other day. We do these 5-day challenges. And the people who sign up for the 5-day challenges is the sort of the test group, and the control group is other folks. And the lead count that we're getting from people, or they're getting, is like 600 or 700% more on the 5-day challenge group. The DMs are higher, like all of it. And so if you want to check it out, it's essentially think of what he did with the Paperclip strategy, but now we're applying modern or new technology to it. Hit me up for that. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, there's no problem in your mortgage business someone else hasn't already solved. Your problem is finding the answer when you need it. This podcast is designed to provide some of those answers. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.